Apache Indians roamed these winding trails through the great sunny desert of the Southwest. The same birds and animals and insects they knew still inhabit this land, and the same flowering shrub and cactus still grow here. But today, this glorious pageantry of color and life has become a rich and productive desert, undreamed of in the early days of this unforgettable land of Geronimo. The giant saguaro, monarch of the cactus family and trademark of the Southwest, still burst into flaming beauty each spring. And the beautiful palo verde trees still grow among the great towering saguaro, their bright blossoms a golden mecca for the birds and bees that live in this desert wonderland. A wonderland now, but a land of dry, barren waste little more than a generation ago. The hedgehog cactus, which is one of the first to blossom in the spring, is abundant with vivid scarlet flowers, and a delightful surprise for those who may think of the cactus as only a prickly, leafless plant of little interest or beauty. The ocotillo is sometimes called the candle flower or devil's paintbrush. Hostile Indians used to lash their captives with its spiny branches. But today, if you want a unique fence about your hacienda, you cut down the branches, stick them into the ground, and they will continue to grow. You don't build a fence in the desert, you simply plant one. Some of the world's finest nectar is stored by the desert willow, the mesquite, and the golden catclaw. No wonder the swallowtail butterflies of the desert find these colorful plants so satisfactory when they go shopping for sweets. Equally gay and colorful are the lemon yellow flowers of the prickly pear, seen every spring against the brown slopes. The strange grit-tailed lizard and the collared lizard are part of the abundant mesquite life. And moving quietly about through the tree stumps is the chuckwalla lizard, another interesting fellow who continues to make his home in this land of sunshine. The candy stick snake still crawls over the hot sands. More cold-blooded than the lizard, this harmless species has to preserve the moisture in his body, and so he takes one look at the hot sun and does a neat disappearing act until the cool of evening. Beware of the Gila monster, for he is one of the 2 poisonous lizards in the world. Give him a wide berth, for his bite may cause dehydration, bleeding from the pores, and very often, death. The rattlesnake prefers to prowl about during the night, much like the Indians who used to raid these same desert regions many years ago. Like the candy stick snake, he finds it necessary for survival to conserve as much moisture as possible during the hot day. And you may be sure he isn't fooling when he hangs out that do not disturb sign just before curling up for his afternoon nap. The cowboys call him Old Buzzsaw because of the sound he makes with the rattles in his tail. The rattlesnake will always avoid a fight if he can make a safe getaway, but it is better not to provoke him, because then he will bare his fangs and prepare to battle for his privacy. If sufficiently annoyed, he will sometimes strike twice, so fast that very often the first strike is blurred with the second. A desert waterhole is sure to be a center of thirst-quenching activity, for water is essential, and many species of birds gather here to drink their fill. They include the Gambel's quail, the mourning dove, and the small Sonora dove. The white-winged dove tests the cool water and finds it most refreshing indeed. And then the mourning dove steps up for his share, and very much like a horse, he drinks and then tosses back his head to swallow. Everyone's thirsty today, the tiny Sonora dove, who sips daintily from the clear water in the pool, as well as the Mexican housefinch. The favorite sport of the vermilion flycatcher is to catch insects on the wing and fly them home to his family. When the thermometer registers 120 degrees, the birds of the desert are vitally concerned with air conditioning. and the wise mother bird spreads her wings carefully over the nest to keep her young cool. The Arizona verdin is an ingenious architect. This small bird with the golden head and rusty shoulder patches uses the sharp twigs of the catclaw when he builds. He adds a roof to protect the nest from the heat of the desert day as well as from the chill of the desert night. And for extra protection, he lines the nest with plant down and feathers, because insulation is a practical necessity in the desert. The Arizona cardinal, who looks much the same as the eastern cardinal, is probably the most brilliant songster of the entire desert. When the male is fully matured, his plumage is bright scarlet. The cardinal is but one of the many beautiful birds who lend color and life to the Mesquite Mesa, which many folks think is a still and parched wasteland. The Gila woodpecker may be found near the saguaro forests, and while there is no shortage of trees, he has a definite housing problem. As soon as he has finished drilling a hole, a flycatcher, owl, or other bird may move in and take immediate possession. It isn't unusual for the Gila to complete 3 or 4 holes before he may occupy one himself. The mesquite forest is also the home of the Gambel's quail. In the early morning, a lookout searches the region for coyotes and snakes before the rest of the covey emerges. The survival of these noisy and chattering birds is a striking example of the vital part conservation plays in the desert country. 1,300 dozen Gambel's quail were shipped from Yuma County to California markets in a 6-week period during 1900. This species was finally saved from total extermination by strictly enforced game laws. These laws were so effective in their control that the Gambel's quail, which is considered to be one of the gamest of birds, may still be found over most of its former range, and in sufficient number to permit hunting in the fall of each year. The summer cycle in the desert begins 2,000 feet above the plain in Sabina Canyon. During early July, rhydelias cover the ground with their gay beauty and add to the rapidly changing floral display. And the magnificent California poppies are a lovely sight as they push their bright way into the rising hills and up the narrow floors of the gullies until this once barren and desolate land is filled and covered with their rippling red and gold. In isolated places, the tiny mammillaria blooms. Virtually extinct, this delicate plant is most difficult to find. If you get too near the bigelow or jumping cholla, its branch tips will pierce your clothing, and its spines may even penetrate the leather of your shoes. And the great staghorn cactus is unpleasant to come in contact with, too, but a familiar sight as it stands out against the summer sky, its barren, spiny branches closely resembling the antlers of a deer. It might be well to take a tip from the Palmer thrasher, for he is a patient and painstaking bird who has learned to adapt himself admirably to his living conditions, and he must surely know great satisfaction in the battle for survival he wages so successfully. He deliberately builds his nest in the crown of the cholla, although it is a painful threat to most other forms of life on the desert, and he finds complete protection among its glistening thorny spines, because his home is built high and snug, and in taboo territory, the hungry fledglings within the thrasher nest may live happily without fear of coyotes, hawks, and other marauders. Even a reconnoitering snake who might try to climb the limbs of this cholla plant would be speared by its sharp needles and would wither and die in the blazing sun that floods the desert. The early settlers who barricaded their homes and fought for survival in this same country many years ago were not as completely protected from the dangers of the desert as the Palmer thrasher, who has turned a common obstacle into a stepping stone to safety. The fruit of the prickly pear resembles a fig with thistles and provides life-sustaining moisture to birds and insects. Desert wasps and even the coyotes feed on these luscious pear-shaped fruit, and the Indians of the Southwest have learned to make jams and liquors from them. The corrugated cactus called the saguaro shoots up from the vast reaches of sand. In the southern part of Arizona, the only state in which they grow, 63,000 acres have been dedicated to the preservation of these proud giants, and their wax-white blossoms have been selected as the official flower of the state. Reaching a height of 50 feet with a great spreading root system, the saguaro is virtually a desert tank, for it swells like a sponge and takes in tons of water during heavy rains. The barrel cactus is a desert compass, always leaning to the south or southwest. Though rarely higher than 6 feet, it too has a phenomenal capacity for storing water. The broad-billed hummingbird, like all hummingbirds, has the unique distinction of being able to fly backward as well as forward. He sets a swift pace, and it is fascinating to watch the rhythmic beat of his tiny wings. The male plumage of this rare species has a brilliancy of color found only in precious stones. And who knows, perhaps in this same desert region years ago, Geronimo may have paused to watch this small, beautiful bird. Even the fleet-of-foot Indians must have envied the remarkable speed with which the broad-billed hummingbird attacks the desert flowers. A swift, successful raid and a bountiful prize of captured sweets. The Chiricahua Mountains rise some 2,000 feet above the level desert floor. And today, the trails and passes of these mountains, where Geronimo and his Apache raiders used to roam, are abundant and beautiful with the flowers of the chili coffee plant, sometimes called the Mexican jumping bean. The yucca plant is found all through the lower mountain regions, and while it is in no way related to the cactus family, it is found in somewhat the same territory. Its creamy white blossom, which appears in clusters on a flowering stem, is the state flower of New Mexico. 2 of the species contain soap-like substances and have been used for washing purposes for many centuries. A popular nickname for the yucca is Spanish bayonet because of its sharp-pointed leaves, which are the approximate size and shape of a bayonet blade. This plant is relished by cattle to such an extent that it is fast disappearing from most of the ranges. Over 500 species of acacia or locust tree are scattered over the warm regions, and the desert has its own proud share of the beautiful birds of paradise flower. Another handsome species of the hummingbird, the rufous, is quite common to these Chiricahua mountain slopes. When the sun hits the bright patch of his throat, he resembles a small gold nugget. He is an interesting little fellow to watch as he gathers nectar from the stalk of the mescal plant. And he has a most possessive attitude toward the stalk on which he works. If another bird approaches it, the rufous will soar 100 or more feet into the air, and then, like a miniature dive bomber, he will zoom down and knock the intruder from the flower. A serious and competitive business to the rufous, but an amusing sight to those who watch. The Arizona white-tailed deer, on the other hand, are most congenial in their habits as they feed quietly among the numerous shrubs found deep in the shade of the canyon. They seem to gorge themselves happily, but they could hardly be considered gourmets because their favorite of all foods is poison ivy. Beyond the Chiricahua Mountains and up through the northern part of Arizona toward the Grand Canyon are the ever-shifting whirlwinds or sand devils, which sometimes develop into the great dreaded twisters that strip the desert soil and blow the dried and uprooted tumbleweed plant across the highways and fields. This peculiar plant, so very appropriately named, tumbles awkwardly across the land just ahead of the strong and persistent wind. As it rolls along, it drops its seed, and so is continually being spread out and replanted in many new areas. Although it is nothing more than a dried-up weed, loosened and scattered by a desert wind, the tumbling tumbleweed is a strange and fascinating sight to watch and to wonder at. The amazing story of the Grand Canyon began millions of years ago. It is a story without an end, for the single span of all human existence is but a minute in the life of the immense gorge cut by the Colorado River into the high plateau of northern Arizona. To stand on its rim today is an experience that fills one with awe and wonder, a spectacle almost too great to comprehend or believe. History books tell of its fabulous length and width and depth, but if simple storytelling could adequately describe this geologic wonder, it might begin like this. Once upon a time, there was a slow, patient river. Then, of course, it flowed at sea level. But as the land rose higher and higher, it flowed more swiftly, and its cutting powers increased until today this tearing, raging stream carries nearly 1 million tons of sand and silt each 24 hours. While the river cuts downwards in an almost unchanging course, the rocky walls of the canyon are exposed to wind and rain and chemical action, resulting in the most remarkable example of Earth's sculpture by erosion in the entire world. Erosion, however, does not always result in breathtaking beauty. Intensive overgrazing, combined with the forces of nature, often strips the top cover from the desert, allowing a runoff, and the sheet and gully erosion which follow can destroy the countryside in its gouging process. A single flash flood from the mountains, combined with this dry wash, can cut to a depth of 12 or 15 feet in the matter of a few hours. This threat of erosion is being met today in many experimental areas, where grasses and shrubs are being sown in order to hold the soil and moisture and prevent repeated and ruinous runoffs. Normal growth in restricted grazing areas contrasts sharply with the results of unrestricted grazing and points to the desert's great need for effective conservation. The Roosevelt Dam, where waters of the high mountains are impounded, offers complete control of the irrigation system and an abundance of electrical power. Dedicated in 1911 by Theodore Roosevelt, this first major storage dam has unlocked the wealth of the soil and has turned barren desert valleys into great inland agricultural empires. With the addition of this water, wheat fields are planted and their yield is flourishing and profitable. The warm winter climate makes it possible to harvest winter crops when they are not available in other parts of the country. And so with sun and water, this land of shrub and cactus has now become a land of lush fields for rich growing, a miracle undreamed of years ago. More than 150,000 acres of alfalfa are planted in one county of Arizona. It is used to pasture sheep during the winter and for fattening the desert cattle. Under proper conditions, as many as 5 cuttings may be made during a single year. Although horse breeding is not a desert industry like agriculture, many fine saddle horses and roping horses for ranch work are developed in this region. Market gardening is done on a tremendous scale in this desert valley. Carrots are one of the many important winter vegetables grown in this area and have become a $25 million industry. When the crops are ready for picking, the Navajo Indians help with the harvesting, and sometimes whole families will appear and add native color to the productive fields. And even a drowsy papoose becomes interested in the great activity which surrounds the gathering of the vegetables and their loading for market. Another vital crop is citrus fruit, which is making rapid strides as a source of agricultural income under the modern system of irrigation. There are acres and acres of orange groves throughout the Southwest, and hundreds of acres on which the huge desert grapefruit is grown. The desert country is virtually free from frost, that great and menacing arch enemy of citrus fruit in all other states. Yes, there's plenty of good growing and good living in the superb climate of this land of Geronimo. A network of fine highways and excellent rail transportation make the large cities easily accessible to the rural folks so that they may share with their city cousins all the advantages of modern, gracious living in some of the more metropolitan areas. Tucson, for example, is a winter and health resort with increasing industrial potentialities and a rapidly growing population. It is called the Sunshine City, is rich in historical background, and has a metropolitan area of some 60 square miles. Tucson, the desert city, offers a happy blending of Eastern culture and Western hospitality. The University of Arizona in Tucson attracts many students from the East, and small wonder. The pursuit of learning is a palatable potion indeed in this fully accredited university. Its library is open to the public, and numerous study and lecture groups are always available to the townspeople and tourists. Its 85-acre campus is bathed in year-round sunshine, and classes frequently are held out of doors or in walled patios. The small fry, of course, have their own modern and miniature campuses. One of the many fine private schools located in Tucson is practically an open-air kindergarten, where the youngsters may spend many happy hours in small, intimate classes, romping about the supervised and completely equipped playground, or splashing merrily in a swimming pool with their sun-tanned classmates. Another one of the busy and vital cities of the sunny Southwest is Phoenix, the capital of Arizona. Although it has a tranquil setting in a wide, fertile valley, it is the financial and shopping center of the state, the very focal point of its economy. This great desert metropolis boasts of many fine government buildings, beautiful streets, homes and churches, and excellent schools. And of course, it is more than proud of its superb climatic conditions, which are found nowhere else in the entire world, unless perhaps in the upper Nile Valley of Egypt. Like Tucson, it is a mecca for fun and sightseeing, with many large, luxurious resorts and equally attractive motor courts. The magnetic charm of Phoenix is its constant sunshine, its lavish and perpetual bloom, and the lure of its open roads which lead to beautiful parks, prehistoric ruins, and cool, delightful haciendas. Of course, the magic key to its amazing growth and expansion and beauty is irrigation. The dry and once unproductive desert country has become one of the nation's richest agricultural areas through the labor, intelligence, and persistency of man. The miracle of water, combined with the native sun, has made possible the giant citrus groves and extensive truck gardens, the many charming homes and their gay-flowered patios, the workable ranches where the finest of horses and cattle are bred, and the many thriving industries without which a city cannot prosper and grow. Phoenix is a typical Western wonderland, a tantalizing mixture of commerce and culture and carefree living, and a far cry from the barren desert which Geronimo once knew so well. Not so very long ago, historically speaking, the Indians and white men knew nothing but hardship and struggle and uncertainty in their bitter battle for survival in this same desert. But today, this new land of Geronimo is a land of opportunity and promise, and there is work and play and plenty of good fellowship for the fortunate people who live and make a living in this rich country. Mountain trails that once were desolate and dangerous are now the favorite haunts of men and women seeking relaxation in the great healing outdoors of the Southwest. Parks and picnic sites are happy destinations of many riders who follow picturesque trails into the giant saguaro forests. And at the end of the day, as the sun sets, there is plenty of joy and contentment to be found beside the lively campfire where they stop to roast their steaks and chops. The Jemez Indians, as well as others who live on reservations in the Southwest today, are justly proud of their tribal traditions despite their new way of living. And to the accompaniment of tom-toms and chant, they still perform the buffalo dance, dramatic pantomime of the hunt. Their fantastic costumes and brilliant headdresses highlight many a colorful street parade at Gallup, New Mexico, where they gather each year in August. This public performance of their ceremonial dances is a thrilling experience for everyone who watches. The striking festive garb, symbolic steps, and weird chanting are about all that remain of the old-time Indian, strange relics of his early form of worship. Today, the Indian is a friendly, respected, and hard-working citizen in a land his forefathers never dreamed was possible, a rich and abundant land of peace and plenty. He has become a skilled farmer and a craftsman in the fields of industry and art, and although he may still cling to many of his ancient tribal customs and superstitions, he follows the peaceful way of life with a quiet dignity. On the Navajo reservation, the corn dance is still celebrated. As in ancient times, the women grind the corn between the matete and the mano. For hour after hour, prayers are intoned for the precious corn crop. Repeated dramatic calls for the blessing of clouds and rain can be heard as the men provide inspiration with their solemn chanting. The toss horse-stealing dance is another of the strange symbolic dances. It is a dance of victory and was performed years ago in celebration of successful tribal raids. Every year, the Indians of the San Juan tribe perform the intricate steps of their famous deer dance. This is their spectacular way of asking the Great Spirit to watch over and to protect the deer during this period of privation, and that the green juniper boughs will afford protection to the fawn. The traditional Paiute bow and arrow dance is one in which the braves ask that they be given skill and accuracy in the coming hunt. And this peculiar step, done by the Jemez hoop dancers, demonstrates their great dexterity with hoops fashioned from willow stalks. Another strange and solemn dance is that of the sun dancers of the Mescalero Apaches. It is a devout and rhythmic celebration of their annual tribute paid to the young girls of their reservation who are about to enter womanhood. The Acoma Laguna Indians offer their traditional prayers to the bald eagle, who will always symbolize to them the Great Spirit who soars high above the desert plains, watching and caring for the flocks which graze in the green fields of this land of enchantment. While many of the ceremonial dances performed today by the various tribes are routine pleas for good weather, good crops, and green fields, the Shawnee Indians still celebrate with a colorful war dance, as they did many years ago. It was the custom then for warriors to wear their most splendid costumes before leaving for the battlefield. They believed that the elaborate dress would assure honor to their tribe as well as to themselves, and would ensure them an honorable passage into the happy hunting ground if they fell in battle. The women on the Papago Reservation are skilled in basket work, rug weaving, pottery, and many other crafts. They work with a traditional and painstaking care and create many pieces of rare and enviable beauty. And on the Papago Reservation is the San Javier Mission, founded in 1700 by the Jesuit fathers, one of the finest examples of mission architecture to be found on this continent. Many legends surround San Javier. The most interesting is that of a Franciscan father who labored for 14 years to rebuild it, only to die in a plunge from the great tower just before its completion. Whether or not this tower was left unfinished as a memorial to the good padre is of little importance. The true miracle of this centuries-old mission is that it still stands proudly in the desert, although wind and weather have rounded and worn its lovely lines. The hot desert sun still shines down upon its fired brick walls, great wooden doors and delicately carved latches. Good padres continue to walk beneath its great stone arches and stroll along its winding paths in devout meditation. And a fascinated and faithful people still worship in its shadowy interior. San Javier stands as a worthy symbol of the vision, the faith, and the fortitude that have built this land of Geronimo.